Hey everybody, this is Kohdok here, and well, the new generation of Pokemon is just on the horizon, and a lot of people have been kind of reminiscing on the Pokemon days and declaring which Pokemons have been their favorites. I figured I might as well jump on the bandwagon. Of course, the first questions I'm sure a lot of you are asking are, do I plan on getting Pokemon X and Y? Maybe. I'd have to get a 3DS first, but I'd probably get Pokemon Y because, you know, I think Yatagarasus are way more awesome than deer. Yeah, that's what Evil Tell is. It's a Yatagarasu. Yatagarasu is a raven with only 3 legs up. Anyway, and of course the next obvious question is, what starter will I pick? Well, I was looking at Fennekin for a while, but then I found this. Gotta love the 90s, back in the day when it was perfectly acceptable to put an established animated character in a completely different universe. Anyway, since a lot of people have been going over their favorites, I figured I'd try the same thing. So, this is a list of my top 10, 15 Pokemon. Don't worry, it's a bit longer than a lot of people's lists, but I'll try to make it entertaining. Now, just a disclaimer, when I mention a Pokemon, unless I say otherwise, I also mean everything in its evolutionary family, because, come on, what are the main 2 reasons everybody gives for putting Eevee on their list? Well, it's adorable and it evolves into all this! So, that's just kind of my disclaimer for now. Unless I say otherwise, I mean all the Pokemon in its tree. So, let's begin. First up on our list is an oldie but a goodie. It's Onix. The original largest Pokemon ever made, this giant snake made out of rock achieved particular infamy in the hands of Brock, both in the video games and in the anime. You know, back in the day, if they ever encountered a really severe problem, Brock would be like, wait a second, I have a giant snake made out of rocks, go! And then he'd throw it out, and then all the bad guys would be like, oh no, it's a giant snake made out of rocks, run away! Yeah, really, before Charizard got rolling, Onix was the Megazord of the Pokemon anime. So, of course, after doing all this really awesome stuff with this gigantic snake made out of rocks, what does Brock do? He gives it away. And then he goes and catches a Lotad. Downgrade, dude. Downgrade. I don't know, maybe the writers are tired of having to compensate for the fact that one of the characters owned a 30-foot snake that could solve so many problems. Well, now that we've gotten that giant snake made out of rocks out of the way, we can write some really good episodes. Now, in the actual games, Onix can actually be caught fairly early in both Generations 2 and Generations 4. And it's actually kind of interesting for a rock Pokemon. Despite its incredible size, it actually doesn't really have the best hit points or attack stats. Its defense is really good, and something that's actually notable is that its speed is actually a lot better than a lot of rock-type Pokemon, making it actually a fairly handy Pokemon. Now, it's a bit of a project Pokemon in that it's not as easy to use as a lot of the other rock types in the game, like Rhyhorn or Geodude, but it comes built in with Screech that helps take care of the attack problem and is also really handy to use against some certain problems. And of course there's its evolution Steelix, which is a fairly impressive Pokemon and was one of the first Steel types. I really like this Pokemon. It has a chin only Jay Leno could love, and it was one of my main Pokemon in Pokemon Stadium 2. Yeah, did you know in Pokemon Stadium 2 they actually rewrote all the cries of the Pokemon to sound more realistic? Steelix freaking roared! I used it a lot in Pokemon Stadium because they really loved doing these toxic protect combos that of course the computer always aced because, you know, the computer cheats in Pokemon Stadium, if you know that. I figured that a long time ago, and I definitely got the icing on the cake on Pokemon Coliseum when I was hit with Fissure. Twice. In the fog. Anyway, because of Steelix's Steel type, it was completely immune to the toxic, and it just kind of became a battle of attrition at that point.
That didn't accomplish much.
Anyway, the fairly well-known Onix and its incredible evolution is enough to give it the spot on this list. Up next, we have one of the version mascots of the game. This time, the version mascot for Pokemon White 2, White Kyurem. I think the best way to introduce it is to read off its Smogon entry.
Once upon a time, there lived a sad third brother named Kyurem. Day and night, it would be humiliated by its brothers, Reshiram and Zekrom, the rest of the dragon tribe of the OU metagame, and millions of Pokemon trainers around the globe. The abuse was so horrific that the poor thing descended into Underused, the land of mediocre Arcanine and Milotic. It prayed to Arceus, asking for a respite from its constant torment. With the release of Black and White 2, the god of Pokemon answered its prayer. While the poor third brother remains neglected, It has gained a new form with the most overpowering and spammable attacking stats ever. With base 170 special attack, it now has the most powerful Draco Meteor in the game to take advantage of, and its Ice-type stab, which used to be the butt of many jokes, can smite the many walls in the Uber tier that are weak to ice. The ugly duckling of the Tau trio has not returned as a beautiful swan, but as the sacker of cities and destroyer of worlds. The Pokemon world can now tremble in utter terror. Because its name is White Curum, it rhymes with Endearin, which is what its victims can't do as it skewers them. Well, it was pretty good up until the end anyway.
Anyway, that is no lie. White Curum has some absolutely phenomenal stats. Its special attack stat makes Mewtwo look about as powerful as an eggplant. It's still a bit slow and its defensive typing isn't the best, but this thing more than makes up for it in sheer physical power. I actually have a modest-natured one with really good special attack. I think it's either 30 or 31. So I'm packing a pretty mean White Curum. It's also the star of my current Pokemon deck, which I used to call White Curum knocks out all the things, but I'm thinking of just calling it Curum Smash! Because all it does is it creates a situation where Curum does unsurvivable damage, i.e. 200 damage, every turn. Really, only a Wailord with a giant cloak can withstand that. Due to White Curum's incredible power, it is the Pokemon Entity of Destruction. Well, before they made an official Entity of Destruction. Yeah. Now, I know what you all are about to think. I start my list off with a giant snake made out of rocks and an epic fire-ice dragon monster, and they're both gonna get upstaged by a freaking sheep. Mareep is on this list, and I keep it fairly low down because it's one of those Pokemon that I really don't know why I'm so drawn to it. I just kind of seem to keep running into it. I mean, it's not the best electric type out there, but it's pretty far from the worst. It is a fairly decent early game electric Pokemon that has neither been oversaturated by marketing, nor does it carry the painful sting of disappointment. Darn it, Blitzel, you were supposed to evolve into an epic thunder unicorn, not an ordinary zebra. Ampharos is an okay Pokemon. It learns some great type coverage moves, such as Power Gem and Signal Beam, but not really much beyond that. Unfortunately, it has low speed and a middling defense and a weakness to Earthquake, which is apparently some kind of sin in the world of Pokemon. I've used Mareeps for a long time, and even recently in the Pokemon White 2 video I did about the Pokemon movies, I used a Mareep in there that had evolved into a Flaffy, which I finally remembered I was going to name Flossie, although that's not really a fitting title anymore since it's an Ampharos and thus doesn't have any fleece at all. Then again, I could always transfer her forward into Generation 6 and evolve her into Amphabulous. Oh yeah, Mega Evolution. That's gonna be a fun concept to deal with. Is it going to make some previously mediocre Pokemon viable, or just make the overpowered Pokemon even more overpowered? Mareep has such a fun design though. It's cute. Those things on its head, I guess you could think of those as either being ears or really stylized ram horns. Although I do kind of wish that maybe its shiny form would be like black. They didn't have that whole white sheep, black sheep dynamic. You know, maybe that's why they brought it back in Pokemon Black and White too. Up next, it's Fiona. What, really? Yeah, I admit I am probably the only person to have Fiona on the list, but I actually have a fairly interesting example for it. A few years ago, I went to Italy for about 3 weeks, and I know there is plenty of things to see and do in Italy, but the museums close after dark, and I just knew that Spectrobes wasn't going to entertain me the entire trip. Seriously, of all the games I could have packed, why did I pack Spectrobes? Anyway, I had a few Pokemon plushes, and I figured I'd bring one with me. I'd just gotten the Fiona plush in the mail, and I figured, you know, might as well bring it along. It would probably be the one plush I wouldn't miss if I lost it in Italy. But here's the funny thing. Once I got to Venice on the tour, I discovered that they actually sold these little gondolier straw hats, and they're actually a perfect fit for Fiona. So I actually put it onto Fiona's head, and it kind of became my mascot. So I kind of think Fiona's a fun Pokemon, mostly because of that experience. I mean, Venice is a city on the water, isn't it? Some say that Mew was the first Pokemon. Others say it's Arceus. But let me settle the argument now. The actual first Pokemon was Rideon.
So fine that I really want to make you mine.
It's the first Pokemon that they finished designing according to the developers, and its index number in the Generation 1 games is 001, indicating that it's first. There's also a lot of concept artwork for Pokemon's original version, Capsule Monsters, which use a Pokemon that looks a lot like Rideon. Rideon, the giant rhinoceros with a drill horn, what's not to love about it? It has incredible attack and defense and hit point stats for a not completely evolved Pokemon, and it's just been really useful in every game I've ever caught it in. I mean, it is a ground rock type that can learn Surf. No, really, it's amazing. A living rock with a quad weakness to water, teaching itself to swim. They say Bagon has a lot of determination in learning how to fly. I don't care what you say, a rock learning how to swim, that is real determination. I admit I also really like the design for Rhyperior, Rhydon's evolution and introduced in Generation 4. That thing on the top of its head, it looks like it's wearing a set of headphones, so when you think about it, Rhyperior, it's sitting there on the battlefield, there's chaos all around it, but it's cool. It's just sitting there, listening to its jams on its Rhypod. And, for a ground rock Pokemon, it has an astoundingly deep move pool. It can learn Earthquake, Stone Edge, Mega Horn, Poison Jab, Iron Tail, Dragon Tail, Aqua Tail, Thunder Fang, Thunder Punch, Thunderbolt, Thunder, Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Payback, Shadow Claw, Crunch, Dragon Rush, Outrage. It learns Outrage. Base 140 attack, and it can learn Outrage. Now, of course, its special defense stats and its speed are kind of inhibited, and unfortunately it doesn't learn Flame Charge, although if it did learn Flame Charge, it would probably be absolutely amazing, but I really like it. It's actually a surprisingly reliable Pokemon, and so is its evolution, but not really Rhyhorn. It doesn't enjoy the deep move pool of its successor, so Rhyhorn's kinda off the list here. Now, my big game for Generation 3 was Pokemon Ruby, and of course Latios is available in that, but since I own a Neon ticket and an E-Raider, the special Pokemon with the Soul Looter that I could catch was Latios. Latios is a fun Pokemon, it's pretty cute, and as one of the wandering Pokemon, it actually kind of made me curious as to, what do those wandering Pokemon get up to while they're wandering around the world. Latios is also the star of my favorite of the Pokemon movies. I've already mentioned that I've been to Venice, and, well, clearly the director of that movie had a love for Venice too, because there's a lot of chase scenes in that movie, and I mean a lot of chase scenes. But it's Venice. They can have all the chase scenes they want for all I care. No amount of chase scenes in Venice is too many. But the movie also flows really well. The villains come off as genuinely threatening rather than just pompous like all the other ones do. The battles actually flow and move throughout the city. They make sense. It's not Pokemon standing there taking turns. No, they're running around the city. They're not paying any attention to turn order. It's just amazing. And it starts in a non-traditional way. Rather than a Pokemon battle, it starts with a race through the city streets. Yeah, another chase scene, but I've already given my piece on that. It's probably my favorite movies. Oh, and the music. The music I'm using for the background night now is called Search for the Girl, and it's one of the best pieces out of it. I'd say go give it a listen. But I kind of wish they'd explore the relationship between Bianca and the two Pokemon a bit better. I mean, it's hinted at that there's some friction between Latios and Bianca, but really that's not that much at all. I mean, this is a story about basically having to keep a unicorn in your backyard and the relationships surrounding that and having to keep all of that a secret. I mean, that's enough material to make a standalone movie. I don't know, maybe they could make a little one-off thing that they could do about that. So Latios, also when imbued with the Soul Gem, is a pretty good Pokemon. It's got great all-around stats, good bulk, good special defense, and it's definitely a good Pokemon. Like everybody else who's been making these lists has said, you never forget your first Pokemon, and mine was Squirtle. Now, unlike the rumors some people heard that you have to pick that Pokemon on the front as your starter, I just heard that it would be more powerful if you pick that Pokemon as your starter. Now, I have run the other starters since then, but my first starter was definitely a Squirtle, and I don't know if there's really much I can say about Squirtle that hasn't already been said in all these other top 10 lists. I mean, it's a turtle with cannons on it. There's actually a lot of turtle Pokemon, aren't there? There's like one per generation. I mean, of course there's Squirtle, but then there's Torkoal in Generation 3, and Turtwig, another starter turtle in Generation 4, and Turtoga in Generation 5. Was there a turtle in Generation 2?
Am I not turtly enough for the Turtle Club?
Well, obviously the person in charge of Pokemon must really like turtles to have one per generation. Up next was a fairly quick entry. It is Larva Tarr. Larva Tarr, I admit, is more on this list for sentimental reasons. It's one of the first Pokemon that I ever, really, truly, seriously trained to become its final form. Larva Tarr, it's a little green thing. It can be cute, it can be menacing, and it evolves into Godzilla, so what's not to love?
Godzilla! 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 And Godzuki!
Oh, except for the fact that you have to design your entire team around its final evolution. But still, it's Godzilla.
Godzilla!